Hey everybody, this is Matt. I'm making this video because I think it could be used of people trying to learn the game. This video is going to be about all the civilizations, and I'm going to break it down, the strengths and weaknesses of each civilization, and kind of list off some of the cards that go along with each strength or weakness. So I'll just start out with nature, or some people call it green. The strength is right off the bat they have a ton of mana acceleration, and when I say mana acceleration, I mean like being able to get multiple mana cards into play each turn. Like each player is only allowed to play one mana card a turn, while nature decks have ways to get out multiple mana cards each turn, and it puts them a huge, it puts them ahead of the opponent because they can play larger creatures, bigger, more higher cost spells and creatures quicker than their opponent can. They have ways like Sprout, which is Sprout, Bronze Arm Tribe, Karate Carrot. Karate Carrot's a little bit different. While Sprout and Bronze Arm Tribe just put the top card of your deck into your mana zone, Karate Carrot actually becomes mana whenever he gets banished. And there's multiple creatures in nature that become mana when they get banished. Another strength of nature is they have a lot of group synergy. And when I say synergy, I mean like the creatures work together. Like one will help the other. And they have a lot of like each of your blank creatures gets X amount of power. And stuff like Snap Claw, which gives all your evolutions plus 2000 power. Essence Elf, which gives all your other creatures plus 1000 power. Raging Goliath, which gives all your other beastkin plus 2000 power. Stuff like that. They also have a lot of powerful attack, and if you don't know what powerful attack is an ability that allows you, whenever this creature is attacking, it gets plus however much power whenever it attacks. What that means is the creature is stronger when it's attacking, but on your opponent's turn, when they go to attack it, because they can tap, because your opponent can attack tapped creatures. The creatures that have powerful attack will be stronger when attacking, but weaker when defending. And creatures like that are Silver Fist, which is plus 4,000, has plus 4,000 powerful attack. Illusory Berry, which has plus 2,000 powerful attack. Steel Hammer, which has plus 4,000 powerful attack. The last strength of nature is it has a lot of double breakers, which means the battles with nature are going to be more aggressive. They maybe even be quicker because they'll be breaking shields quicker. Double breakers in nature is some cards like that are Flame Spike Tessurion, Lepidose the Ancient, Granite Avenger, and Bronze Arm Sabertooth. Now we're going to talk about weaknesses of nature. One very obvious weakness of nature is they have no blockers. Not a single one. Not a single creature that has the blocker ability. It means that nature is natively just a very aggressive civilization, and it just wants to just attack, 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 and get the battle over quickly. Um, another weakness of nature is that it removes enemies by converting it to mana. Um, the spells do. There is no nature spell that just banishes a creature. All the nature spells target a creature and put it in your opponent's mana zone. That's a negative in my opinion because it gives your opponent mana. Other civilizations may be able to just banish it and get it off the field and whatever, but this gives it, gives your opponent mana. Now, some people say that's an advantage because there's ways to get creatures back from, the discard pile, but there's very few, if any, ways to get cards back from the mana zone. So, I mean, I could see it as an advantage or a disadvantage, but I think overall, compared to all the other like creature removal spells in the game, nature has a disadvantage at that point. What's interesting is JT Kaijudo on YouTube. He mentions how nature doesn't have a lot of creature removal, and that's true. I mean, other civilizations have multiple cards that affect creatures. But really, all nature has is return to the soil, which affects level 4 or less, root trap, which affects anything, and tendril grasp, which affects all level 3 or less, even yourself. So there's a new one in Dragon Strike Infernus that allows your opponent to get to choose a creature, you know, and put it in their mana zone, but very few options. And I think it's interesting because Fire and Darkness have a lot of creature banishing cards, but Nature doesn't as much, and I think that's because Nature has the mana acceleration part of it. Um, so it's taken away some of its own creature banishing ability, and it's put it towards mana acceleration. I think that's why it doesn't have as many options to get rid of creatures. The last weakness for Nature is that it has limited draw. It only has one card that can draw cards, and that's Reap and Sow, which is a 4-cost spell that you look at the top two cards, you put one in your hand, and you put one in your mana zone. And it's a great card, but it's pretty much a staple on any kind of nature deck because it's like the only draw card you only have. I mean, there's other. I mean, there's like one other option. You got the Great Arena, which is a creature that has an effect whenever you play a creature that's 5,000 or more power, you get to draw a card. But it's very, very limited draw overall compared to other civilizations. Um, I'm talking about you, Water, who has all the draw pretty much. But so that's nature. Very aggressive, not defensive at all, and just it's all about getting big, bulky, and just you know what I'm saying? That's nature. Um, I talked about water. I just brought it up a second ago, and I'll talk about water now, or blue, as some people call it when they're describing their decks. Strength of water is they have a variety of different blockers, like Florogil Manta, which is a 3 for 4,000 blocker, Frogzuka, which is a 4 for 5,000 blocker, but they also have weaker blockers, that are like Ice Launcher, which is 5 for 3,000. If you don't know what the blocker is, it's a creature that has the blocker ability that allows it whenever your opponent's attacking you or one of your creatures, you can tap this creature and it will divert the attack to it. And water has a good number of blockers, but it's kind of like all over the place. Some are above the curve, and when I say above the curve, I mean the cost of it is less than its power. So like a cost 2 blocker with 3,000 power would be above the curve. But half a bunch of them are also below the curve. So like Ice Launcher costs 5. So you would be expecting like a 5,000 blocker or more, but it's really a 3,000 blocker, and that's because one of the weaknesses I'll bring up later in a second. Blue, by far the biggest advantage they have, the biggest strength to water decks, is they have lots of draw. They have spells that can draw you cards like Logo Scan, which is a 4-cost spell that draws you 2. Spy Mission, which is a 5-cost spell that draws you 2, and it's a Shield Blast. They got creatures that can draw you cards like Aqua Seneschal, which whenever it attacks you get to draw a card. You got Cyber Trader, which whenever you play the card, you get to draw a card, and if you choose to draw a card, you have to discard a card. It's still drawing cards though. I mean, I could go on and on and on about what creatures and spells in water that let you draw cards, and a lot of players like to draw cards because if you're not drawing cards, then you're relying on whatever you top deck, whatever that top card of your deck is. When you on the start of your turn, you go to see what you get. That determines if you're going to win or lose the game. I mean, if you don't pull anything you need, I mean, if you need to get something out there and you don't get it, then you've likely lost the game. And water, you don't run into that problem because you're just drawing cards and you have this huge hand and you're like, ha ha ha, I can do whatever I want with it. So huge advantage to water, huge advantage. Another strength of water decks is they can bounce target creatures, and this is unique to water. There's not really any bouncing creatures with any other civilization. It's their way of handling creatures. Nature put them in the mana zone. Water bounces them back to the opponent's hand. Um, which, they have all kinds of different ways of doing it. They have Rusalka Aqua Chaser, which bounces a creature back to your opponent's hand. Water Spout Gargoyle, which you choose two target creatures and they bounce back to the owner's hands. Ice Blade, which is a 2-cost creature. It can bounce anything that's level 4 or less back to the opponent's hand. Veil Vortex, which is a 4-cost spell. Ice Blade's a spell too. Hopefully I didn't say it's a creature. Veil Vortex is a 4-cost spell which bounces anything back to the hand. Um, so a lot of way to bounce cards. People say it's about tempo. Tempo is, as I'm getting out creatures, my opponent wants to get out creatures too, so that we're on an even footing. But if I keep bouncing their creatures back to their hand, they're not going to have as many creatures as I have out. So I'm going to gain an advantage over time. And I think water plays that tempo game better than any other civilization out there. Um, Weaknesses for water. I think the most apparent weakness for water is uh, the creatures are overall weaker. If you look at the effects, they're fantastic. Bounce stuff, draw you cards, all kinds of cool effects. You know, but their power is low. Like Aqua Seneschal, only 2,000. Rusalka, only 1,000. You know, the upside is though a lot of the evolutions are pretty strong. Like Emperor Axon, which is a 4 for 6,000, and Emperor Neuron, which is a 3 for 5,000. So I mean the evolutions are really strong, but the overall creatures are kind of weak because they have these amazing abilities. And it goes back to Ice Launcher, the blocker, which is 5 for 3,000. It's weaker because it has a good ability to it, which I don't know what it is at the top of my head, but I'm sure it has an ability that affects why it's 5 for 3,000 and not for a 5 or a 6,000 or whatever. So that's water. All about the draw, all about the draw, all about the bounce, all about the bounce, all about the bounce. Great abilities, kind of weaker. I mean, I've seen mono water decks before, but it only really works in one type, and that is Cyberlords, and that's because Cyberlords have just a tremendous amount of support for other Cyberlords, but there's really not as much support for other kind of mono water decks because the creatures are weaker, and although you can draw cards and you can bounce their creatures, it can be hard at times to really ban it, beat their enemy creatures in battle and secure the win all by itself. So you see water, put into a lot of different decks because of the draw and the bounce, but you don't really see it that much because of the, strong creatures. Okay, the next type we're going to talk about is fire, or some people call it red. Um, you know, a lot of the strengths to it, it's a very aggressive civilization, so it wants to remove your opponent's enemies from the field, really, really quickly. They have all kinds of things like Barrage, which is a spell that says banish all enemy creatures that are less than or equal to 2,000 power from the field. Comet Missile that banishes any blocker, one of my favorite cards in the game. They have a lot of creatures that when they come into play or whenever they attack, they banish enemy creatures like Blast Force Captain. Whenever it attacks, you can banish creatures with a total combined power of 4,000 or less. A strength unique to fire is that it attacks. It has it has fast attack, which is an ability you don't. Fast attack is an ability you don't see on any other any other civilization or creature. And what fast attack does, it allows the creature to attack the turn it is played. Normally creatures have summoning sickness, or evolutions don't have summoning sickness, which is like a quasi fast attack. But for the most part, creatures have summoning sickness, which means the turn you play the creature, it can't attack. But a lot of the fire creatures have fast attack, which means it can attack the turn it's played. Like Dragglide, the Swiftest, which is a 4 for 2,000. Gilliflame, the Assaulter, which is a 4 for 5,000. Bolt Tail Dragon, which is 8 for 7,000. What fast attack means is that I can get at these creatures quick, and I can attack you, and I can scare the crap out of you. And you're like, oh, but I'm trying to get something now. And you're like, no, but I'm attacking now because I'm fast attack. Oh, you know what I'm saying? Another strength of fire decks or fire creatures in general are they have strong evolution lines. I mean, they're strong natively, but at the same exact time, there's all kinds of different evolutions out there for them. We have very strong Dracon evolution lines, Doom Geckos, Armor Dragons, just all kinds of different things, options to evolve from. Dracon is currently the most, the has so many different options. And when you're evolving into an evolution, you're getting more power. You're getting often a cool ability or double breaker along with it. So I mean, there's a ton of reason that to be interested in evolutions, and fire creatures have a ton of evolutions to choose from. Um, Fire has a lot of powerful attack. I mentioned this with nature, but fire, like nature, has a strong offense but a very weak defense. Cards like Super Bazooka Volcanodon, which is a 3 for 1,000, but it has plus 4,000 powerful attack. So when it's attacking, it's a 5,000 creature, but when it's defending, it's only 1,000. It's almost like having an attack and a defensive value, but all wrapped into one. Dracon Weaponsmith, 2 for 1,000, but it has a plus 2,000, powerful attack. Stuff like that. There is a lot of synergy, a lot like nature. There's a lot of synergy between the creatures in fire, like Twin Cannon Maelstrom, which says all your other creatures have plus 2,000 powerful attack. And just so you know, powerful attack stacks. So if you have Super Bazooka Volcanodon, which has plus 4,000 powerful attack, and you also have Twin Cannon Maelstrom, which gives all your other creatures plus 2,000 powerful attack, if they're both in play, Super Bazooka Volcanodon will be 3 for a 1,000, but it will have plus 6,000 powerful attack, meaning that for three cost, it'll be swinging for 7,000 attack or power, which is so great. Hyperspeed Dragon, which has an effect that says all your armored dragons have fast attack. Sky Crusher's Elite, when it has an effect that says all your creatures when you play them, if they have less than or equal to 2,000 of power, they have fast attack. I mean, it's all about just getting in play really quick and attack. Weaknesses of fire. Every civilization has weaknesses. A lot like nature, fire has no blockers. It is a very aggressive civilization, has no blockers whatsoever. I mean, no way to block whatsoever. It's all about, using all the kinds of spells it has. It has a ton of spells to remove creatures from play, and their creatures are really strong. So it's all about, just manually getting rid of them. It's not about stopping them or slowing them or anything. Just like beating them up, pretty much. The removal is limited. When I say limited, I mean there's a ton of options. But in the big picture, it has no single spell that can remove any creature from the field. I mean, like other civilizations has spells that can affect any creature. Water had that one spell. Okay, I'm just gonna scroll it for a second. Water has Veil Vortex, which bounces anything. Nature has Root Trap, which puts any creature in the mana zone. Fire has no spell that just says banish target creature. Darkness does, Terror Pit, but fire does not. So, I mean, it has a lot of different spells which can affect, its spells overall are really good at removing weaker creatures, but once you get over 5,000 power, it really has nothing to handle it, you know? So, and to me, that's a weakness. I mean, unless they're a blocker. I mean, you can take out a 9,000 Granger, as long as it's a blocker, boom, you know, with a comet missile, no problem, no question asked. But it's situational. It has no draw whatsoever. Fire has no draw whatsoever. There's not a spell that like draws you one. There's not a creature that under a certain condition draws you a card. There's just nothing. Then there may be something in the new Dragon Strike Infernus, but I'm not thinking so. I don't think there is anything in Fire that can draw you a card. So, it's gonna fall behind a lot like nature. Nature can fall behind, but it has a Reapinso that can draw you cards and Great Arena if if you play it right. Fire has nothing. So it's all about getting to play, boom, 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 boom. You'll beat you up, fire, aggressive. It's a great civilization to team up with a more defensive civilization like light or water, or maybe even dark. That have blockers you can choose from, and you can integrate into your deck. The next civilization we're going to talk about is light, or as some people call it, white, because of the Magic the Gathering comparison, even though it's technically yellow. The biggest strength for light, in my opinion, is it has the strongest blockers in the game. Um, like, just to mention one off the top, Granger Tower Keeper. It's 6 for a 9,000 blocker. I know from my own opinion, every time it's hit play, it's controlled the pace of play. Because there's not a lot of creatures that have over 9,000 power. And it can come out on turn 6 or even sooner if you're playing it in a nature deck. And when it comes out, it just like says like, hey big guy, I'm gonna banish you if you try to attack. And it really can slow things down. It really forces your opponent to remove it from play as soon as possible, because it's very hard to get around it. There are cards that can have greater power or can get greater power or are unblockable. That can get around the card, but it's very few and far between. It has Star Lantern, which is 3 for 3,000, which don't seem that amazing. It seems on the curve, but it has a great tap effect. Whenever it blocks, you get to tap one of your opponent's other creatures. So it literally blocks two creatures for one block, which is fantastic. So it has some of the strongest blockers in the game. Um, just mentioned about a tap ability. Unique to Light are abilities to tap enemy creatures. You don't see it anywhere else in any other civilization that allow you to tap creatures. It may not be as powerful as banishing creatures, but being able to tap them means that you can now attack them. While you normally wouldn't be able to attack an untapped creature, being able to tap them, you can attack them now, which it's kind of in a way, able to a way of banishing almost. It's half the way to banishing almost. You have Storm Spark Blast, which taps all enemy creatures. Helios Rings, which taps two creatures, both of those being spells. Lyra the Blazing Sun, which is a new dragon in Dragon Strike Infernus, which taps a creature. Canyon Skimmer, which is a new creature in Dragon Strike Infernus, which taps a creature when you play it. Um, just a ton of ways to tap creatures, and tap can come in use. You can tap blockers and then go after the shields when they can't block you. You can tap blockers and then attack them with something stronger to banish them. You can attack. You can tap important creatures that would never be attacking. So you can attack them like some of the if they have a lot of time when you see a creature with a really nice ability, it will have a small power. Be really weak creature with a great ability. Well, they're never going to attack with it, meaning that unless you have a spell that specifically can banish that creature, you're never going to be able to attack it with your creatures. Well, you can tap it with light and then attack it, hopefully. Um, Another strength that light has is that it has a lot of spell manipulation, which in a way is pretty unique to light. It can get spells back from the discard pile. It can look at the top card of your deck, get a spell. Cards like Keeper of Dawn, which allows you to get a spell card out of your discard pile whenever you play it into the battle zone. That's one way of doing it. There's Seer Serpent, which whenever you play it, you get to search your deck for a spell and put it in your hand. That's pretty cool. So there's a way to do that. There are ways to recycle spells, search your deck for spells, all that kind of stuff. There are Another thing unique to Light is Shield Edition. No other civilization allows you to lay extra shields. With Light, you can lay extra shields. You can completely change the pace of the game when you could be down to one shield left, and you play a card, and suddenly you're at 3 shields, and your opponent's suddenly losing now. Cards that can do that is like Andromeda of the Citadel, which is a dragon. It's a 9-cost dragon in the new Dragon Strike Inferno set, which whenever you play it into play, you get to place 2 more shields down into play, which is fantastic. You have Cobalt, the Storm Knight, which it's an evolution, but whenever it's played, you may place down an extra shield from your hand. You have a spell card, Recharge, which is the same thing as Cobalt, allows you to place an extra shield down. So, I mean, you can control the pace of the game. They actually have a deck, a competitive deck type, that's just based off this, and it's called Cobalt Control. And this was before Andromeda even came out, and there people were controlling the pace of the game by using Cobalt, the Storm Knight evolution, and just laying extra shields throughout the game. Now, Light has weaknesses too. It has no way to remove enemies from the field through spells. You know, like nature can send them to mana zone, fire can banish them, water can bounce them to the hand. Light's form of it is tapping them, which means they're still in play. Which means if they have an effect, the effect is still working. So it can be hard to actually using just light cards to remove creatures from the field. Um, Another disadvantage is they don't have a lot of draw. I mean, really, water has all the draw for the most part, and darkness and light and nature just a little bit. It does have one card called Spark Cage, which is just brand new in the Dragon Strike Inferno set. Which for 3 you get to tap a creature and draw a card. I think a lot of people will be playing that card. Um, Also, a big disadvantage for Light is most of their blockers cannot swing for a shield. When I say swing for a shield, I mean like cannot attack the opposing player. It's because most of them have the Skirmisher ability, which Skirmisher means that all this creature can do is attack other creatures. It can't attack the opposing player. Um, that's bad because if your opponent has no creatures in play, you would be like, oh, I'm going to win soon. But with Skirmisher, you can't actually attack the opposing player, so you can't break any of their shields, meaning that you can't literally win the game. You can have a bunch of blockers out that have Skirmisher, you're not going to win the game. Unless you get out something without Skirmisher. Unless Light actually has a spell called Rally the Reserves, which is a 5-cost spell. It says, this turn only, all your creatures can attack as if they don't have Skirmisher. So that's a cool way of doing it. What's interesting about all the tapping with Light is, you tap them, but the Skirmisher isn't that bad because now you can now attack them with your blockers. And some of your blockers will untap at the end of your turn. So you can, tap a creature, attack it with the blocker, and then at the end of your turn, untap it so you can block with it on the opponent's turn. So that's pretty cool. So Light is very, build a wall, defensive, Mr. Mime like, tap your creature, slow you down, all this kind of stuff, you know, but it can be offensive if it wants to. There are light cards that can attack uh, the opponent. It's just a lot of the blockers can't do that. So light is a great type to mix into any kind of deck because it can be defensive. It can be offensive if you know how to play with tapping. And so it's a great little civilization. And the last civilization we're going to talk about today is darkness or black, even though it's technically purple. Um, the biggest strength for darkness cards, in my opinion, is they have tons of way to banish creatures. You know how I told you how like fire has a ton of way to banish creatures, but it doesn't really have a way to just banish anything. Well, darkness can. It has Terror Pit, which just says choose creature, banish it. Don't have to be a blocker, don't have to be level 4 or below, just banish it. Just get it off the field. It has Death Smoke, which can banish any untapped creature, which is great for blockers. Bone Blades, banish any creature that's level 4 or less. It even has evolutions that when they come into play or when you evolve into them, like Hydra Medusa, whenever you play it onto a chimera, you can choose anything and banish it. So I mean, there's a ton of different ways to banish creatures. a strength that is unique to darkness is creature rebirth, and you don't really see this anywhere else. Um, but they have ways to take creatures that have been banished and are in the discard pile, and either put them back in your hand or put them into play. And that's like Dark Return, which can choose any creature in your discard pile and put it back in your hand. Or Return from Beyond, which can choose any non-evolution creature that's less than or equal to level 4, costs 4. That's what I mean by level 4. But any creature, non-evolution creature that costs 4 or less in your discard pile and put it right into play. That's a very popular card, which I have none of, but I wish I had some of, because it's really, really good. You also have a new dragon that just came out called Draco Thane of the Abyss, which when you play the card Dragon into play, you get to choose 2 non-evolution creatures that cost 4 or less from your discard pile and put them into play as well. So it's like a double Return from Beyond, pretty much. So I mean, it's like Raising the Dead, pretty much, if you think about it, darkness-wise. You know, it's completely unique to darkness. You know, maybe a theme for darkness. You may hear unique to darkness a lot. But here's another one: hand manipulation. They have ways to force your opponent to discard cards, or ways for you to discard cards from your opponent's hand. Stuff like fumes. Whenever it's a creature, whenever you play it into the battlefield, your opponent has to choose to discard a card. They have to discard a card. They get to choose, but they have to discard a card. Gigastand. Gigastand? I guess is what it's called. Whenever it attacks, your opponent has to discard a card. Razorkinder Puppet is a little bit different, but whenever you play it, it costs 7, but whenever you play it, you get to look at your opponent's hand and choose a card, and they discard it. So it's even more powerful than the other 2 creatures. You have a spell called Skull Shatter, which costs 8, and you get to discard your opponent's entire hand. And if you want to go on for a smaller version of it, you know, there's a 2-cost spell that forces your opponent to discard a card too. So there's all kinds of different ways to manipulate your opponent's hand. And it's very popular to team up darkness or water, because with water you get to draw a bunch of cards, and with darkness you can discard a bunch of your opponent's cards, and you're just like, you have a full hand, they have no hand. It's a huge advantage. Huge advantage. Well, another ability that's unique to darkness is Slayer. And Slayer is really interesting. It's really, really interesting. It's one of the most interesting abilities I think in the game. What Slayer is whenever this creature would be banished in battle, whenever it loses battle and would be banished, it takes the creature that banished it with it. It's like pulling the guy down into the grave with it. And it's really cool because they put it on these really weak creatures. So you have to play them strategically, but you can take down any creature in the game with them if you play them right. And that's stuff like Acid Tongue Chimera, which is a 5 for 3,000 Slayer. Skull Cutter, which is a 3 for 1,000 Slayer, one of my favorite cards. Like, for instance, let's say they have, just like a 14,000 creature, like Thornspike Tessurion. I think that's called Flamespike Tessurion. And you're like, well, I can't beat that with my little 1,000 Skull Cutter. You go to attack it, it beats you in combat, but you have Slayer, it also gets banished as well. So if you sacrifice the level 3 creature for their level 6 creature, evolution creature, that also will take the thing it evolved from with it to the discard pile. So I mean, it's a huge advantage you have if you can play it correctly. Pretty much it's going to remove something from the field. It's going to. Unless your opponent plays a spell to remove it. But, I like the ability a lot. It's pretty cool. But Darkness also has some weaknesses too. One weakness is it has very limited draw. It's much like nature, much like light. It has very, very limited draw. Really, the only kind of draw it has is through a creature ability called... the creature is Black Feather of Shadow Abyss, which is a 5 for 2,000 creature. Well, it says whenever a creature is banished, you get to draw a card. Now that works for Darkness because you banish creatures a lot, but the creature overall is very weak and fragile. And it would not be hard at all for your opponent to tap it and beat it in combat with almost any other creature they have. So, that's really the only kind of draw they have. So, yeah, you may want to rely on a different civilization that may have a better draw to it, like Reap and Sow or Spark Cage or something like that. Or Water. What a surprise. Um, Another weakness to Darkness decks, or cards in general, are they have limited blockers. They have blockers. It's not like Fire and Nature. They actually have some blockers. The problem is a lot of the blockers have weird abilities. Like some of them cannot attack at all. You know, some, whenever they win a battle, you have to banish them as well. And you'll see that like with Skeeter Swarmer, which is a 2 for 4,000, which is so high above the curve. I mean, you're paying 2, you expect a 2,000, this is a 4,000. It's so great. But the second it wins a battle, it gets banished. I mean, it pretty much guarantees that it's going to be banished the first battle it comes into. Because if it loses, it's banished. If it wins, it's banished. Because of its ability. Dream Pirate, on the other hand, it's only banished when it attacks. So you can play it slightly differently. You can just use it as a plain old blocker. It's 3 for 3,000, which is respectable. But it means that it can never attack. It can, but it's going to be banished, pretty much. You know? Ironically, even though Darkness has a lot of blockers with weird abilities that usually limit itself, um, Darkness also has arguably the best blocker in the game, which is Scare Adorable of Gloom Hollow, which is 3 for a 2,000. Don't sound very strong. It's actually below the curve, but it has, a great ability that says if it is blocking a creature, or actually if it's in combat with a creature that costs 4 less, neither creature is banished as a result of battle. Which means it can block a whole lot of creatures, and not get banished. And it's really become, the most played blocker in the game. And if you go onto eBay and you look the card up, it's going for 15, 20, $25 each because of it. Because of this weird ability. I find it really interesting that a lot of the blockers for Darkness have weird abilities that are make them weaker, make them vulnerable, yet they gave them, Scare Adorable of Gloom Hollow, this completely overpowered ability. I'm not saying it's broken because it doesn't really break the game any, but it definitely, you see it's just a rare, and it's worth more than many super rares. Many very rares, just because of that ability of theirs. It's a really, really powerful ability. Um, the last weakness for Darkness is it's much like water. The creatures are weaker in general because they have great effects usually. Like Fumes, which is a 4 for 2,000, or Razorkinder Puppet, which is 6 for 3,000. Meaning that, you usually want to team it up with a civilization that has strong creatures. Use Darkness for maybe the blockers and the cool creature removal and card hand manipulation. But then use another civilization like Fire for like the super strong creatures and all that kind of stuff. So those are the 5 civilizations. I hope you've learned something about them today. They all have their strengths and weaknesses, and that's why it's really fun to combine them and make like a nature light deck or a darkness water deck. It's really cool. And there's people out there. It's very common to see a triple civilization deck, like water, fire, darkness, or something like that. I've even heard of people playing 5 civilizations, all 5 civilizations in the same exact deck, because it's not that complicated to do it in Kaijudo. As long as you have one card of that civilization in your mana zone, you can play any card of that civilization. So once you get one of each civilization in your mana zone, you can play everything in a 5-color deck. Not saying I recommend it, but it's possible. So, thank you for watching the video. If you liked it, give me a thumbs up. If you like my channel, please subscribe to it. I'm going to continue to try to make unique videos that help people and offer something to think about. Thank you for watching. Kaijudo rules. I got some packs up in the back. Oh, 3D. I can't transverse 3D. Oh, whatever. Bye.